Tomorrow, the Chattanooga City Council will vote on the proposal by Chip Henderson to regulate Airbnb and like organizations, like platforms, like networks that allow homeowners in Chattanooga to rent out their wonderful homes to visitors from other states, other countries, speaking other languages, wearing other kinds of garb than we wear, for a stay in Chattanooga at a private residence. That's through the Airbnb network. There are others like it, but that's the main one. So I use Airbnb as shorthand for the whole industry. The regulation proposed is premised on a map. The map is carefully drawn based on how noisy people in various parts of town are in complaining about the idea of a neighbor who rents out a house. In fact, Darren Ledford had a survey, and he said 100% of the people with whom he spoke, with whom he asked about this, with whom he spoke about this question, whom he asked to describe what their reactions were when he described it to them, was negative. 100%, he said. And so based on this kind of a fearful response about what that is, and it's unknown to me, and I really don't know much about it, as homeowners say, the city council is preparing to enter into the wondrous Alice in Wonderland world of the illegal act, the unconstitutional act. And what's really wondrous in this Wonderland world is that people will accept it. You, my listener, are likely just to accept what is openly unconstitutional and openly illegal. It is a usurpation of the people's right. It is a gathering of the power of ordinance, the gathering of strength of municipal muscle against what? Against whom? Against you, my listener, and your rights of property in the city of Chattanooga. And there are, as you read today at Nooganomics.com, there are 2 or 3 main ways in which this proposed ordinance is unconstitutional and illegal. And I would say it's ungodly. It's ungodly, even though the Episcopalians at St. Peter's and St. Nicholas' school are arguing for it, and they want to have a special protection within the illegal proposal by Chip Henderson. What they want is special protections. They are fearful, and Mike Mallon joining with them from GPS, Mike Mallon, the attorney, saying that, well, there may be rapists who come into Chattanooga who rent short-term rental vacations. Rapists may come with their families on vacation, or alone, or maybe in groups. Maybe people who do child porn will be renting Airbnb houses near schools such as GPS, and maybe they'll kidnap a child or two for a little porn movie production before leaving town on the way to the Grand Canyon, maybe, or on the way to San Francisco for part B and part C of their vacation ritual. Well, this is part of the picture where we have these schools, 2 of the 3, with a Christian emphasis, a biblical interest, a concern for what God says, a concern for the power of grace, right? They are a very liberal body in the Christian community. And so you'd think that their liberality with the word, their easygoing care of the word would be applied to people, and that they would be as gracious and easy with the people around them as they are with the word. But they're not. In fact, they're very hard on strangers. And the Episcopalians at these 2 schools have a very bleak view of the world, just horribly bleak. In fact, it's so bleak that in their rationale for this plan and for their own exemption within it, there is a call for the totalitarian state, the surveillance superstructure, something like what we have now, right? That's something that seems to be beckoned by the Episcopal Church and its representatives in the God-fearing schools of St. Nicholas and St. Peter's here. And then, of course, GPS, Girls Preparatory School, we can be sure that the young girls in that school are not being taught about standing up for their rights, right? You think that if they had a feminist perspective, which they do at GPS, that they would want their girls to talk about defending the innocent, right? Talk about learning the legal trades to protect the poor and make sure that that oppression is done right. in that it is set aright and the wrong undone, right? Or at least the wrong compensated. Whether wrong against women, wrong against unborn babies, wrong against gays, what have you, that the students at GPS would have this sense of social justice put into their breasts, and so would have all of them a right view of the ordinance that's going to be voted on Tuesday here in Chattanooga. This is David Tulis at AM 1240, FM 92.7, and 95.3 HD4 high definition FM. I am the local economy guru. I am the leading Nooga centrist in Chattanooga, or so people say. Though I would say perhaps I have a bit of a tussle with Dave Crockett. Dave Crockett, the candidate for mayor the last go around, who insisted that he is the leading Nooga centrist as he works away trying to get high-speed rail into Chattanooga and North Georgia as a kind of minister without portfolio. Well, we are here trying to love our neighbors, trying to urge people to buy local with a lococentric view, a lococentric, Nooga-centric perspective. Now, that view is not trademarked, and none of the language which I offer you today is trademarked. So if you're just passing through town on the interstate, maybe in one of the traffic jams that we've had this morning, you can take what we have to say about applying lococentric thinking, thinking locally, acting locally, thinking to your town, to your part of the country, if you are from a far place, and just transferring everything wholesale there. Christianity, of course, is the lubricant for making these kinds of things happen, because it has a realistic view of the fall, a realistic view of man and God's place in God's creation. And so it truly will bring progress. We do plan to talk about progress today and the idea of social theory. Does Christianity have a social theory? And do any Christians believe in progress? I think that since the humanistic definition of progress has been eclipsed by continuing disasters of progressivism and statism, there's not much hope on the progressive side. And in that theory of progress through the state, right, progress through man-directed evolution is collapsing. But what about Christianity? We'll ask that question today, and we'll camp on that piece of territory today on the program. But right now, we want to ask about this plan by the city council to effectively to wreck constitutionally protected God-given rights. Now, I probably should say that in the proper order. It's God-given rights and constitutionally protected ones. So you would say God-given, constitutionally protected rights, because rights are not constitutional. They're simply protected by constitutions. And I think if this ordinance passes, most people, probably every soul affected by it, will just sit there and complain and do nothing. And that is what we are trained to do. We've been trained to take abuses and just to say, well, that's the price of progress we have to pay, right? Didn't Oliver Wendell Holmes say, well, taxes are the price of civilization? Well, we just have to accept this tax now and this subjugation because, well, it's for our own good. And we really don't have any say. And, you can't win fighting City Hall. But you can win if you have the right argument. And that's what I'm here to do for you, my listener, is to give you the right argument against the Chip Henderson proposal that seems to have the agreement of some people I would identify as conservatives, Ken Smith, for example, and also Darren Ledford, new on the council. I do know something about them. And they do seem to be conservative overall. But, we are sick and tired of conservatives. We've had enough of them. And I hope you, my listener, have no faith in conservatives anymore, because they're not going to bring any kind of relief from that which has plagued us thanks to Republicans and Democrats for the past 75 years. Well, actually, going back 120 years, going back to the leading Republican of all, Abraham Lincoln, right? We are under his, we've been washed under federal jurisdiction, maritime jurisdiction, thanks to Abe Lincoln. So let's give credit where it's due. We have a massive security state and a massive corporate state thanks to him. Well, the problem with the Airbnb bill, the measure, in a larger sense, you might say in a philosophical and moral sense, well, of course, more importantly, I guess would be theologically. Where is it theologically? And I would say that there is some bearing false witness in it, and that would be the ninth commandment, false witness. The false witness is made against visitors to Chattanooga. This statute, this ordinance, proposes that visitors are wicked, right? That visitors are inherently unstable, malicious, covetous, lascivious, lustful people, and especially if they wear strange clothes, maybe especially if they speak a foreign language, we can't count on them for sure. So we have to have regulation of what people freely do with their own homes. These are homes that are privately owned or held, I should say. No one really owns their home in Chattanooga. No one owns a house in Chattanooga because they have to pay a privilege tax, which is called a property tax, every year to city and county. So these municipal corporations tax the ownership, or perhaps the privilege of ownership, and so effectively convert owners into renters. So we're effectively a high-end renter of our own lands thanks to the tax structure in the state. They too are looked at very negatively. There is a fear strategy, a public safety theory that Darren Ledford has, that Chip Henderson has, and the other backers too. Carol Burrs, I think especially, she's hyper. She was giddy with the idea of stopping the last entrance through to get rezoning petitions for Airbnb in the old system, right? In the system we have now, she was just giddy to stop that extra month that certain people would be able to get and make that application for an Airbnb outside this proposed district. She was very upset that people might slip through. So Carol Burrs, Dr. Burrs, is as bad as the rest. She's as bad as a liberal as the conservatives seem to be in their mumblings. And the only party on the city council who seemed to have gotten close to saying something in one of the public hearings was Ken Smith. But there, it wasn't in principle in favor of property. It wasn't in principle protecting the rights of property owners. Don't forget, the right of property ownership is more essential and more constitutional than the protection of your fears about somebody else's possible abuse of his property. Okay, I might think that you, my neighbor, should be under regulation because you may have a sexual pervert as a guest. That fear is less protected constitutionally than your right to own that land and to dispose of it in harmless and innocent fashion as you wish. Right? My fears have less ground and less constitutional protection than yours does to the actual use of that land. Right? If you do a tort against me, if you do a wrong against me as a neighbor, well, I have the courts, right? The courts are open to seek redress. If you've really done me wrong, and by having a neighbor or having a renter, then that's an actionable cause, right? I have a cause of action, and the court is open. As Jerry Summers says, the courts are open. Indeed, they are. The courts are open. And if you have a grievance, you can always go to court. You have to, of course, prove that you were injured. And that's the part here. When we have regulation that no one has to prove any injury. You just seek a regulation, warning of feared threats of injury. And that's what Mike Mallon has done on behalf of GPS. That is what the headmistress and headmaster of St. Nicholas and the other school have done. They've both said, well, we fear there may be rapists. And so we're going to ask for protection in this proposed district. These are Christian schools. They should say, look, people have a right to own property, and even though we may be affected one way or another by this ordinance, it's not right because you're effectively taking property from people who have done no wrong and have done nothing to be deprived of its use. They've done nothing wrong. And here you are saying by this map that, well, we're going to outlaw the private short-term rental of a private residence. That's what, and we Episcopalians, we Christians, right? They represent us in this matter. If they're Christians, openly Christians in this dispute, they represent people who are Christians. And here they're not making the Christian argument at all, not making it at all. Now, so you've got the fear factor, the fear of strangers. You know, they are evil, suspicious. We need to have security. We need to have safety. And this in the gig city. What is the gig city? What is the environmental city? Aren't we holding ourselves forth to the world as the environmental city, as the city that cares about the environment, the city that cares about prosperity, that wants to have business, that want to have new people come here. We want people to move here from bankrupt Illinois. We want people to come here from high-tax Connecticut and the oppressive regulatory regimes in California and people in places such as Seattle, Washington. Well, why are we now saying, well, that's just one part of our agenda. This other part of our agenda is to oppress people who want to rent to these people who are coming here, maybe to move here, right? Maybe the people who come to Airbnb want to move to Chattanooga. And if they're allowed to come here and not stay in a hotel, they might have a stronger sense of connection and identification with this city in which they're going to stay for a day or two, or maybe a week, maybe a month. Isn't that good? Don't we want that? Don't we want people to experience Chattanooga in new ways? Why do we have to confine them to hotels and motels? And why do we have to confine them to just a few Airbnb houses in the city limits in this district proposed by Council Member Chip Henderson? Why limit it? Well, that is a kind of isolationism. The whole ordinance smacks of isolationism. We are afraid of strangers. We don't want to have interactions with the world. Yes, we have Volkswagen. Yes, we have hundreds of Germans here from Lower Saxony and other parts of Germany. But that's kind of against our grain. We really want to regulate strangers. We want to regulate the places they go. We want to convert every house where a stranger may stay into an open accommodation, subject to regulation, subject to taxation. That's what the city council is saying. It is isolationism. It is fear that drives this ordinance. Fear. And city council people should take occasions when they meet someone who complains about this liberty and give that person a little lecture in the free market. That's what these city council members need to do, especially Darren Ledford, a self-styled conservative. He, of all people, should be the one arguing for those who complain to him about the idea. And they speak ignorantly, these people, to him, but they are worried about it. They think this is dangerous. They think it should be regulated. Well, Darren Ledford should turn around and say, well, this is the free market. We live in a free country, and there are all kinds of people with money problems. We have a money-tight economy. We have a disaster ahead economically in a coming debt collapse. Don't you think people should start now thinking about generating new income streams? And is not this an innocuous and good way, an innocent way of generating income for maybe a retiree or maybe a woman living by herself? That's what Darren Ledford should say to these people who are griping to him about it. He didn't hear a single positive comment, he told me in an interview, of anyone saying something nice about the short-term home rental district and the short-term home rental business, not a one. All right, here now, though, is the main reason why the Chip Henderson measure is illegal and unconstitutional. I saved the best for last. And of course, if you have to just tune out all of a sudden because you're on the job or you've just arrived at the office for a late Monday morning start, you can go to Nooganomics.com and read my take about it. And in here, in a nutshell, is the main problem. The ordinance by Chip Henderson that seems to be meeting with approval of the council is that it's arbitrary and capricious. And here's how that works. It's arbitrary and capricious because you and I, let's say, live on opposite sides of a street. And that street is a line on that map, the map that allows Airbnb people inside and bans Airbnb connections outside. Well, how is it that you can do Airbnb because you're inside the Chip Henderson district and I, across the street, right, across 30 feet of pavement, cannot do it, and it's illegal for me to do it, and I can't petition for rezoning to do it either, right? Because that rezoning petition for Airbnb is going to be stricken from the zoning portion of the city code. Well, that's arbitrary and capricious. That distinction between you and me is arbitrary and capricious. So the map itself as a concept is illegal. It simply can't work. It is arbitrary and capricious. Is that how we defend property rights, Chip Henderson? Is that how we do it? Do you really want to have something that's illegal? Do you really want to have something that's unconstitutional? And you have it passed and hoping that no one will notice. Is that it? You hope no one will have to sue. Well, think about it. If you put this map in place and someone has to sue, think of the horrible burden that person is going to have to go through to undo the heavy hand, the dead hand that you and your ordinance have placed on that poor man or that poor woman. Think of it, maybe a single woman with children in school and not getting all of her child support payments, and she's going to have to sue you because you have put this ordinance upon her, knowing it's illegal and unconstitutional. Because I'm giving you notice. I'm giving you notice, Chip Henderson, that this ordinance is unconstitutional. And you want some poor woman who's not getting her child support payments and who has a big house from her married days, and she's renting out half of it, and you want her to not do this anymore. Is that what you want? Someone needs to file administrative notice to City Council about this movement. I have not had time to do that. Maybe you can. This is David Tulis. We are here at Nooganomics Radio, and I'm glad you've given me just a couple of minutes of your time, just a couple of minutes. We've got more. We're going to hear more about this topic since it's so hot. It is red hot today, and you're hearing news coverage of this at Nooganomics Radio. David Tulis, love your neighbor. Love your neighbor and buy local. And don't be afraid of strangers. David Tulis.
The Tennessee